Let me see if our things are working. Well, welcome everybody. And we are here today for our webinar on Leasing 101. So if your student is ready to move off campus or they're already kind of looking for a place where they can move to, this is the place to be. So we are going to be talking about, how to find a place for you. And if you give me a second, I think we have a little delay about something, but we're here. So let me just, anyways, we're going to go ahead and get started with Jesse and Bemet. They're both joining us. Jesse's joining us from Rent Monster. So Jesse, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a few minutes. And Bemet is our off-campus housing coordinator, and he will also be talking about the upcoming fair. So I will leave you both ready to go. If we're having some technical difficulties sending this over to Facebook for some reason, but we're working on it. So if you give me a second, we'll go ahead and Jesse, if you want to start introducing yourself, go ahead while I make sure that this is working for us. So it may not be what what I'm looking for, but let me see. Technology sometimes is, there we go. It's just, and my computer doesn't want to help. So, all right, here we're about to go live. Let me just, and so everybody, just to let you know how this is going to work, what we are doing today is we're letting our guests come in. So we're both on Zoom and on Facebook. So if you want to view this later on, because maybe you have to go back to work or something, this is going to be the time. So we are going now live. So there we go. Welcome everybody again. And so we are here at the off-campus webinar for today. And we are hosting this webinar live on Facebook and on Zoom. So if you have questions throughout the webinar that we hope we do, you can send them to us through the Q&A, and then we will be glad to answer those questions. You can also post them in the comments on Facebook, and then we will get to those as well. So as we give people a few minutes, I still see some people hopping on. So we have 39 over here, and we've got a few more on hopping on Zoom. So Jesse, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, I will just be quiet for everybody, and we welcome Jesse and Bemet. So go ahead.
Thank you. Real quick, are we wanting to introduce Bemet after me, or am I going straight into my presentation?
You can introduce yourself, and then Bemet can introduce himself, and then we'll move on with you first.
Okay, sounds good. My name is Jesse Nystrom, and I'm the managing partner and qualifying broker for Rent Monster. Super excited to be here today.
And my name is Bemet Tashom. I serve as the off-campus student engagement coordinator here at UAB in our off-campus student family engagement office. Happy to be here with you guys today. It's awesome.
Do you want me to go ahead and start?
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse. And we have people here. And again, if you have questions throughout the webinar, put them in the Q&A section, and then we will get to them at the end. And so we are very happy to have all of you here. Go ahead, Jesse.
Great. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you all today and bring you just some information about how to lease an apartment in Birmingham, some things you may or may not know. A lot of you have a student that will be leasing an apartment over the next couple of years, or maybe you have a student that is already leasing an apartment. And this is just a way for us, this webinar, as well as our Leasing 101 course online, the link you see there. This is our way of empowering you with knowledge on the rental market. This Leasing 101 course that we've got online is less than an hour long, is a series of animated videos that we've created. The course is entirely free. You just type in your name and your email address and you have access to the course. I highly recommend that all of you encourage your students to take this course. Like I said, it doesn't take very long, and it just empowers them with knowledge on things they might not know about the rental market, their rights, their responsibilities, and things like that. And then today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's in the course and give you just some things to think about as you go into the market. To start off, I want to talk, let's see if I can get my thing. There we go. I want to talk a little bit about my company. Uh-oh. There we go. Talk a little bit about Rent Monster. So we are Birmingham's apartment leasing company. It is a free service. So the way it works, your student would come in, they'd be matched with an agent here in our office, and that agent is going to take them around and show them options and apartments all over the city and just help them make a decision on which one is the best fit for them and walk them through the entire process and just make it as easy as possible, as smooth as possible for them. We've been in business for a little bit over a decade at this point. We are locally owned and operated, and we have had the privilege of helping hundreds of UAB students over the years to find that perfect apartment. So that's a little bit about our company. So let's go ahead and get started with some terminology. So a lease, most of you know this, a lease is a legally binding contract. What we do see a lot of is some young people might not totally understand the gravity of that. So I would encourage you to tell your student to really read that lease and understand every part of it before they sign anything at all, because it is a legally binding contract that can be held in court. And they don't always understand that. We've seen a lot of young people say, you know, oh, I've changed my mind after they sign the lease. Oh, I've changed my mind. I want to go with something else. And, you know, sorry, but that's not how it works. So really just let your student know that it's important to read that lease and understand it before they actually sign anything. In Alabama, you must be 19 years old to be a lease holder. So if you have a student that needs an apartment that's under 19, that's okay too, as long as they have someone that's living in the apartment that is 19 years or older. As someone that's younger, 18 or younger, they'll be on the lease as an occupant, but they won't be legally responsible for the lease as they would if they were 19 years or older. So that's just something to note. A standard lease is going to be a 1-year lease. And by the way, everything I talk about today in the webinar and on our course is about a standard type of lease or a standard apartment. We won't be covering anything to do with student housing because we primarily do just standard leases. Just, you know, you call up an apartment complex and look at their apartments. We don't really do student housing a whole lot, and it is a little bit different. So the way, you know, a student housing building might have a lease that is separate per person in the apartment, whereas a standard lease, they don't do it that way. They do one lease for everyone that lives there. So they're all in one lease, and everyone on the lease is responsible for the full amount. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the rent. So what is rent? The rent is the amount paid monthly for the rental. So let's say, you know, you come across one that has $1,000 monthly rent, then that's how much you would pay. And your prorated rent would be what you pay that first month if you don't move in on the first of the month. So let's say the student moves in the middle of the month, then their prorated rent would actually only be half a month's rent, since they're not going to be paying for the days that they weren't there. An application is the form used to determine eligibility for renting. So a lot of times you'll see the application be online. So they click a link, they fill out their information, they're going to put in their birthday, their social security number, employment information, and that kind of thing. With that application, it's going to ask them to upload a proof of income, copy of a photo ID, like a driver's license, and then pay an application fee. Usually that application fee is anywhere between $50 to $100 per application. And then a lot of you are thinking, well, my student doesn't have income because they're a full-time student and they don't work. That's okay. You can actually co-sign for them, or, you know, someone in the family. Usually a property is going to require it be a family member, although that's not always the case. And as a co-signer, you'll be on the lease and you'll be responsible for the lease itself and everything in the contract. You just won't have access to the apartment. You won't be an occupant. And I put cosigner / guarantor here so that you understand that those are interchangeable. Both of those words mean the same thing. Cosigner, guarantor, they mean exactly the same thing. So common fees, anytime you hear the word fee, it's going to be something that's non-refundable. And anytime you hear the word deposit, it is refundable. So we'll talk about some of the fees. One-time fees that you'll most commonly pay are going to be an application fee. So with the application, like we just talked about, you'll pay an application fee of anywhere between $50 to $100 per application. And I say per application because if your student is applying and you're applying as a cosigner, then that's going to be an application for each. The admin fee or administrative fee is going to be the fee that covers everything between the application and the lease starting. So all administrative costs, pulling up the lease, processing the application, that's a common fee that you might see. And then if you have a pet, a lot of times you'll see a pet fee. So that's a one-time fee of anywhere between $300 to $500 that covers the pet. Recurring fees are going to be those monthly fees that you pay alongside the rent. You might have a utility fee, for instance. A utility fee could be, most commonly you'll see water be an additional fee on top of rent. So you may have a $100 water, sewer, trash, and pest control fee. And so you just pay that alongside the rent. You might have a parking fee. This isn't very, very common. Usually parking is free around the UAB area. But if you start getting into like the Loft District downtown, like north side of Birmingham, you'll start to see a parking fee be pretty common as well. And that's a monthly fee that's anywhere between $150 to $200. And then you most often are going to need to have renter's insurance. Sometimes the property will actually offer their own renter's insurance from anywhere between $10 to $30 per month. But you can also get your own renter's insurance. I would recommend bundling with any insurance you already have. So if you have auto insurance, let's say through Alpha, it's often more affordable to add on to a package you already have, whether that's auto insurance or home insurance, and go ahead and just get renter's insurance. And that will, you'll often be required to get a renter's insurance package that covers $100,000 in liability. That protects the property. You can add on to that to cover personal property as well. Usually it's not much more, a couple of dollars more a month, that will cover the student's personal belongings. And then finally, you have pet rent. You don't always have to pay pet rent for your pet, but some properties are going to require that you pay a small amount, anywhere between $15 to $30 per month for pet rent. Okay, now let's talk about deposits. So we talked about fees being non-refundable, and a deposit is refundable. A security deposit is refundable at the end of the lease. So in other words, if the student puts down a deposit on an apartment and then changes their mind, they cannot get that back until the end of the lease. So if they decide not to sign the lease, then they will not get that security deposit back at all. That security deposit takes the apartment off the market and reserves it for your student. If they go ahead and sign the lease on this apartment, then at the very end of the lease, as long as they don't damage the apartment, they will get that full security deposit back. And then the other is pet deposit. So we've now talked about three different pet fees or pet. I don't want to use the word fee because that's one of the three, but we've talked about pet fee, pet deposit, and pet rent. So sometimes, and pet deposits are not as common as they used to be. So it's kind of rare to see anyone ask for a pet deposit. Most often they're going to ask for a pet fee. So that's one-time fee and you do not get that back. If they do not ask for the fee, they may ask for their deposit instead, which means that you pay that $300 pet deposit and you actually would get that back at the end of the lease if the pet has not damaged the apartment. So what does the process from start to finish look like? So first thing is find an apartment, hopefully with the Rent Monster leasing agent. Submit the application for the property and pay the application fee. Get an approval. And this usually takes 2 to 3 business days to get an approval. Once the student's application is approved, they will pay that deposit and admin fee, and they will sign the lease. They can sign a lease immediately for a lease start date in the future. So for instance, if someone's approved today for an apartment, they could go ahead and sign their lease for a March 1st start. So that can be kind of confusing sometimes because it used to be that you would only sign your lease on the day that it starts, but it's done a little bit differently now. And a lot of times the leases are actually done online as well. So you can sign it maybe through DocuSign or their online software. So they pay their deposit, admin fee, sign their lease, and then before move-in, you're going to prepare for the move-in by paying all the other fees. So prorated rent, unless they're moving in on the 1st, and then they pay a full amount of rent. Recurring fees such as water or some sort of utility fee or parking fee, and then the pet deposit or fee, and then go ahead and set up any separate utilities. So if they're paying a monthly fee, recurring fee to the apartment for water, but not for power, then chances are they need to set up that power themselves through Alabama Power. A lot of times they need a signed lease to get utilities set up. Not always the case, depends on which utility. And then finally, they get the keys on the day that the lease starts. So if they sign the lease today for a March 1st lease start date, they can't actually get keys until that March 1st lease start date. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about qualifying. We like to call it your crib. So not your place that you live, but your credit, rental history, income, and background. So with credit, a lot of times students aren't going to have all of these things just yet. Maybe they've never rented an apartment before, so they don't have rental history. And that's where you come in to sign with them alongside them on the lease, so that you can help them cover the credit or maybe the income or something like that. But as an applicant who does not have a guarantor, they would need to qualify. They would need to have good rental history. They would need to have good credit history. Income would need to be 3 times their monthly rent. So if the monthly rent, just to make it easy, if it's $1,000 per month, then they need to show income of $3,000 per month. And that's before taxes are taken out. If they have a roommate, they're going to combine those incomes. So let's say each roommate makes $1,500 a month, then combined, they make that $3,000 a month and they would qualify. Finally, they're going to check your background. They're going to check for felonies. Felonies are usually an automatic denial. And then they're also going to check for any violent misdemeanors. A cosigner guarantor, as a cosigner guarantor, you're going to apply alongside them and you're going to need to show really good credit history, and then also income. Sometimes it'll be the same qualifying multiplier, which is 3. So 3 times the monthly rent. Sometimes it'll even be a little bit higher. So you may, in some instances, depending on the property, be required to show 4 or even 5 times the amount of monthly rent in gross income monthly. Something else to know as a guarantor, you are on the hook for the entire lease. So if the student does not pay their rent, then they're going to give you a call, and that will appear on your credit. Some things to know about roommates. So their crib, credit, rental history, income, background, will actually impact your student's qualifying chances. So in other words, let's say your student is a really good qualifier. They meet all of the requirements, but their roommate doesn't. Maybe the roommate has really bad credit, or maybe they have something on their background. This could actually impact their ability to qualify for the apartment. So this is something else for your student to actually talk to the roommate about before they even apply, because what you don't want to do is get a denial and lose all of those application fees because the roommate couldn't qualify. So it's important to talk to the roommate and have your student talk to the roommate about their their qualifications and whether they'll be able to strengthen the application rather than, potentially cause a denial. Roommates are a really good idea if you're trying to save some money. It's a huge difference actually, and I really cover this and break this down in the Leasing 101 course on how this can really save a lot of money. You're splitting the cost all around. In Birmingham, the most affordable one bedroom is going to run around $900, whereas the most affordable two bedroom is going to run around $1,100 or $1,200. And so you can imagine the difference between paying $900 monthly for a one bedroom or paying $600 for a $1,200 two bedroom that you split the cost with. So it really does come out to be a lot more affordable if you have a roommate. And then you can have a cosigner for each student. Not everyone understands that. So like I said earlier, each lease is, they only care about the full amount of the lease. So in other words, if you've got a couple of roommates living together, you need to designate one student amongst the roommates that's going to pay the entire amount of rent. The landlord is not going to accept half a month of rent and with one student saying, well, the other student hasn't paid their portion yet. They don't care. They want the entire amount of rent paid to them by one source. But in order to protect yourself, because like I said, you are on the hook for the entire lease, including the roommates, you can have a cosigner for every single student. That's totally allowed. It's not necessary and it's not required by the property. If you qualify as a cosigner for the entire lease and they really only need one cosigner, but for your benefit, you can require that each student, each roommate have their own maybe parent that cosigns for them. This kind of gives you, shared responsibility for making sure that all these students do their portion. And then every tenant and every cosigner is on the hook for everyone on the apartment, like I just mentioned. Okay, so communication. It's important that the student builds their own relationships with these property managers and any leasing staff that they come across. I hear a lot, and this is my next point, the number one thing I hear from property managers about students in particular is just problems communicating. A lot of times they'll have their parent call or they'll have their coach call or someone else call for them when they could just, walk down the hallway and have a conversation with that, leasing agent or property manager. And this a lot of times will really go a long way if they are just really proactive about building that relationship. I really go into detail on some ways to get good at that and some tips and strategies for communicating with property managers in the Leasing 101 course. But I did want to point this out. This is just a really good way for them to kind of ease into, doing their own things and starting to be their own person and ease into adulting. And maybe you even kind of coach them on what to go say to that property manager whenever they need something. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about rights and responsibilities, and then I'll be done with my portion. So everything I'm about to talk about is going to come from this handbook. It's called the Alabama Tenants Handbook, and it can be located here at this link, LIHCA, which stands for Low Income Housing Coalition of Alabama.org/Alabama-Tenants-Handbook. You can also get a copy of it in the UAB housing, the student lounge. So I think BIMNet, you still have a good stack, right? Okay, so we have dropped off a good stack of these for students. So your student can drop in and get one of these, and it's full of very important information. We have based most of the Leasing 101 course entirely off of this handbook. So let's talk about tenant rights. The law says the landlord has to do certain things to keep the place livable. They must meet all building and housing codes that affect health and safety, maintain all electrical, plumbing, sanitary, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems in good working order. Now, just a quick little heads up, that does not mean they have to pay for the air conditioning. So they may require that the student pay for the air conditioning system or for, for power. But they do have to maintain it so that it works, especially in Alabama, because it gets very, very hot here. So it is a requirement for the landlord to provide a working air conditioning system and heating system. And then they must supply running cold and hot water. Again, they don't have to pay for the monthly bill from the, Spire for gas or whatever, but they do have to make sure that the system works. They must provide a source of heat in the winter. If you pay for heat directly, your landlord doesn't have to pay your bill. Provide and maintain garbage containers, keep common areas clean and safe, let you have peaceful enjoyment of your place, make repairs to keep your place safe and livable. The law allows the landlord to have rules and regulations. Those rules have to apply to all tenants. For instance, they cannot say no kids in this area, for instance. Must apply to every person that lives there, all of their rules. The rules have to promote the convenience, safety, or welfare of the tenants or protect the property from abuse. The landlord has to inform you of these rules before you sign the lease. And during your lease term, the landlord can't enforce a new rule that affects your use of your own property without your written consent. In addition, the law says the landlord can't raise your rent or make other changes during the term of your lease. Unless you do an addendum, you can always do an addendum and change something to the lease, but everyone on the lease must sign it and say that they agree to it. They cannot engage in retaliatory conduct. This means a landlord cannot threaten to evict you, decrease your services, or raise your rent because you complained to him or to a government agency about a problem affecting health or safety, or because you form or join a tenants union. Okay, let's talk about tenant responsibilities now. You have the responsibility to be a good tenant. The law spells out things you have to do. First thing is pay your rent on time. If you owe a late fee, pay it with your rent. If you pay in cash or by cashier's check, it's a good idea to get a receipt signed by the landlord. I recommend, and I put this in the Leasing 101 course, to have a receipt on everything, on absolutely everything. It does not have to be a, official receipt. It can even just be a text message conversation. That will count in court. A text conversation and or emails records. It's always good to get things in writing. And one more thing on that. If this is a really common thing, people think, okay, my landlord is not holding up their end of the deal, so I'm going to stop paying rent. And I do not recommend that you do that. So please make sure your student understands if the landlord is not holding up their end of the deal, the very last thing you want to do is to stop holding up your end of the deal, because then you lower your chances of winning in court. You've got a really strong case against a landlord if it gets there. And we highly recommend we don't go that route if possible. And I talk a lot about that in our Leasing 101 course. But if it does, you want to be able to tell a judge that I've been the best tenant and I've paid my rent on time. So don't stop paying rent just because something is going wrong or you're unhappy. Other things the law spells out that you have to do. Keep the place clean and in good shape. Use all electrical, plumbing, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems in a reasonable manner. Dispose of garbage and rubbish the right way. Do your part to keep the common areas clean and safe. Let the landlord come into your place, usually with 2 days written notice, unless you have requested repairs or unless there's an emergency, to inspect the condition or fix something. Follow the landlord's rules for use of the property based on what's in the lease. Tell your landlord if you'll be away for 2 weeks or more, or if your electricity will be shut off for 7 days or more. A lot of people don't know this, but you do need to give them 14 days notice you need to give them notice if you're going to be gone for 14 days, because they can legally declare a place vacated if you've been gone for a full 2 weeks. So you need to go ahead and let them know I'm going to be gone. The law also includes some don'ts for the tenant. Don't give any false or misleading information on your application or lease. We're seeing this a lot. lately. We're seeing a lot of fake pay stubs, things like that. If your student lies on their application, I'm not saying they will, but if they did and they are approved and move in, the landlord, if they find out that there is a lie on the application, has the legal right to kick them out. So they must not lie on their application. They should not ever disturb their neighbors. And this also includes smells. So keep that in mind. If there's you shouldn't smoke inside an apartment. I think smoking is kind of going out of style now anyway, so that's really good. But any kind of smoking or incense sometimes can be really strong, or certain foods can be really, really strong. Just keep that in mind. You don't really want to disturb your neighbors, and if it happens often and there are complaints, then that could be a reason for eviction. So just keep that in mind. Don't trash your place or let your guests trash it. The landlord can and will hold the actions of your guests against you. So keep that in mind as well. Okay. Okay, so that's all I've got. I'm going to just cover Leasing 101 just a little bit and give you a little more information about what that covers. We've touched on a little bit of everything, but we really go into detail in our course. We cover terminology, qualifying and smart money moves, so just strategies for how to qualify. Tenant rights and tenant responsibilities, we really go into detail on each of those. And then questions to ask, just a list of things to ask the property managers when they go to tour the property, things that you may not think about. Where's the dumpster? Where are the mailboxes? Things like that. And then this is just a breakdown of every single one of those things I just showed you. Terminology, all of those different things. And then that's it. That's all I've got. I hope this was really informative, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse. And it was very informative. So this is a lot of information, but it is great information. So before we move on to BEMIT, we do have a couple questions already coming in, and that is great. So we encourage you to send your questions, put them in the Q&A or via Facebook. And if you see me looking sideways, it's because I'm also monitoring Facebook. And so we've got a few questions that we'll get to in a few minutes. Right now, I'm going to leave you with Bemit Tashom. He's the off-campus student engagement coordinator, and he works a lot with the off-campus side of things as well. So, Bemit, you have big news and a big event coming up. Go ahead.
Yes, so we are very excited in our off-campus student engagement office to promote our upcoming UAB off-campus housing fair that will take place on March 5th here on campus. So this will be a great way for students to kind of just outreach to a lot of our properties in the area, as well as connect with partners like Rent Monster, who will be there tabling about what they have to offer for students. We understand, and this is, I think, universal. A lot of the time it takes bringing resources and programs to students for them to take that initiative to start these conversations. And so this is a great way for your students to outreach and ask the questions that they might have, or connect with these properties that have sparked their interest for this next year. So this is a great time to go ahead and start that process for figuring out what your fall and spring for next 2025-2026 academic year will look like for your students. So that will take place on the UAB campus green, which is our big green space on campus that is right across the street from the Hill Student Center between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And that will it'll be very hard to miss. We'll have a lot of loud music and food trucks, and a lot of our partners, about 40 different properties will be there. And so it'll be a great place to kind of explore all these options. I have a flyer as well that can be displayed. I'm not sure if Carmen has it, but we'll definitely get that. It'll be posted on the Family Hub as well as on all of our social media platforms.
Yeah, you can go ahead and display it while we get to some of the questions. So again, this is a big event coming up, and it's that's going to be a follow-up to all of that that has been mentioned here today. So as we move along, and we've got a couple more questions coming in, big things to remember is the fair is coming up next Wednesday on the campus green from 10 to 2 p.m. And there's going to be over, correct me, Bemit, if I'm wrong, but about 40 off-campus partners coming today, on next Wednesday. So yeah, remind your students. It is already posted on the Family Hub. And so this is just a reminder for you to tell your students. Families are welcome to walk by as well. But remember, this is something, the adulting part of your student taking, more ownership of where they want to live and understanding the options and how to navigate. And so we thank Jesse for providing us all that information. And so we're going to get to some of the questions. We're going to keep this slide up so that you guys take pictures and then resend it to your students. Again, it's posted everywhere. And we do have a couple questions. One is a question from a family member. My daughter's birthday is, she's going to be 19 by June 23rd. So does she have to wait until then to start looking for an apartment? So either one of you can take this question.
So, no, she doesn't, but she cannot be the main leaseholder. What I would recommend once and this is up to you, you could actually be a leaseholder and an occupant on the lease with her. The only thing is that you will have access to the apartment. A lot of students don't always want their mom or, parent to have, a key to their place. So you would be on the lease not as a co-signer, but as an occupant. You could do that until she turns 19. And then when she does turn 19, she could then become her own leaseholder. And you guys could do another lease and take you off of it, or even put you on it as a co-signer instead. So there can be a change in the lease as long as the property manager is okay with that.
Awesome, thank you. There's another question about what are the best places to know that are safe areas to live in?
So fair housing law keeps us from really talking about safety. And the reason is because it can get really tricky as far as discriminatory behavior. You really aren't supposed to talk about the people of an area. And when you're talking about safety, you are talking about the people of the area. So our leasing agents are not going to be able to discuss safety. However, our leasing agents can discuss with you things like safety features of the apartment, whether there are deadbolts on the door, whether there are security cameras, or whether there's a secured access into the building. Other resources that you might be able to look into would be what's it called? Spotcrime.com. That will really show you statistics on the regions of Birmingham and go over safety, what you're comfortable with as far as safety goes. I'm just a fan of kind of walking around the neighborhood and just sort of talking to people. You may not all want to do that, but you might catch, someone walking on the sidewalk and say, "Do you live in the area? What do you like? What do you think about it? Do you feel safe?" Things like that. You can also call the local police department. They can give you some information on that as well.
And just if I can add as well so we have something called the UAB off-campus housing website. This is a great platform for students to kind of explore not only housing options, but take advantage of things such as roommate finder, as well as a good place to post their subleases. However, one thing in response to the question that was asked about safety is on this website, within every property's posts, there's a review slash like feedback section at the bottom where a lot of students and people who have been past tenants of these properties will post just general things about their experience, some tips, some heads up things to look out for before or after signing maybe. And so that might be a great place to kind of get an understanding of the pool of tenants from these properties.
Great tips, yes. And also visit the area at different times. Don't always go at lunchtime when maybe there's not a lot of people there. Visit in the morning, in the afternoon, and take your time. Yeah. And there's another question. Are there any apartments that will take FAFSA as full payment for housing?
FAFSA. Oh, okay. I wasn't quite sure. It depends on the property. And it depends on what the money is allocated for. I've seen places require that certain money is allocated only for housing, and that would be accepted. A lot of times, student loans or FAFSA funds, things like that, are not considered income. And so they could be supplemental and strengthen an application, but they wouldn't be able to be a primary source of income.
These are great questions. We do have a few more minutes, so if anybody has additional questions, please go ahead and send them now, either via the Q&A or, and we have somebody who has raised their hand. Would it be okay if you posted your question in the Q&A for the person who is requesting or has a question, or maybe they're just giving us a heads up or a high five. But anyways, if you put your question in the Q&A, it makes it easier for all of us to kind of look at the question and answer it for you. And again, this webinar will be recorded and it'll stay on Facebook for you to watch it. We will actually also post it on our website, uab.edu/families, within about a week with captions. And so it'll be great timing for the off-campus housing fair. So remind your students about, of course, looking at the Leasing 101 course. I think it would give you, you can do it together, and it'll give all of you a lot of information about how to navigate looking for off-campus housing. And then, of course, remind them about the fair. I don't know if yes, go ahead, Jess.
We will actually, at the fair, we will be next to the main tent with little handouts for questions to ask at each of the tables. So if your student isn't totally sure what questions to ask some of these properties, then they'll be able to use that list for some ideas.
Awesome. So remind your students they can't miss this off-campus housing fair. It's going to be amazing. It's going to have all kinds of opportunities for you to visit and talk to different off-campus housing partners. And so we do have a question. Thank you, who submitted our question. We have a house for this family has a house for their daughter. There'll be one room for several roommates. Is there a good place or website to advertise roommate opportunities?
Yeah, so on our UAB off-campus housing website, that is a website strictly for our property partnership partners due to the sake of safety, because we try to regulate who's posting on this, just so we're not sending our students to these private owned properties with no necessary safety precautions. And so what you can do is in our off-campus student lounge, we have a display board of where a lot of people in the area who own maybe property or have free rooms will post a flyer in there, and then students will typically look at the board when they're looking to explore options and such. So that's always an option that you can post on. However, outside of that, what your student could potentially do is post a essentially like a sublease on the off-campus housing website, ensuring that that person in the that lives there at the moment is a student. Now, if the person is not a student, then they will not be able to post on there because it is very it is student secured, meaning they have to log in order to be able to post or interact with anyone that posts on that website.
There's also a Facebook group that Rent Monster actually runs called, it's a Facebook group, so you'd search it in the toolbar, called Birmingham Community Housing Board. A lot of people post on there. So outside of UAB, if you're wanting to look for roommates, you could potentially post about it there.
Right, awesome. So great information, tons of information. So we invite you to view the webinar again, share it with your student, watch it together and take that course together, and of course attend the fair next Wednesday. And before we leave and before we let you go to the rest of your day, we also want to remind you we will be having another webinar next Thursday at 12:30. Spring break is coming, and so a lot of students may be planning ahead of, plans for spring break or what to do. And as family members, we always, think about them being safe and making the best decisions. So we will be joined by Corporal Kimani George from the UAB Police Department next Thursday, at 12:30 via the webinar, and he will be talking about spring break safety tips. So join us then, and the registration is already on the Family Hub, and you can also look at Facebook for more details. So before I let Jesse and Ben go, are there any last minute things that you would like to say or any reminders? Go ahead.
So on our behalf, as we are the off-campus student engagement office, we do encourage all students, whether they're looking for that next move right now, or maybe they're in it and they're currently looking for some guidance, please do come by the office. We can definitely help you out. We'd love to sit down, maybe have a consultation, talk about maybe the issues that you're facing, or help you navigate whatever hardships you're having at the moment as an off-campus student, as well as take advantage of the resources that we have in our office. We also display a guide every year that we'll also be giving out at the housing fair, which will have a lot of the resources and tools that we offer as a university department, as well as a lot of our partners in the area, such as Rent Monster, and a lot of these properties that'll be at the housing fair are displayed in this guide for some guidance that you can take with you. Yeah. And lastly, of course, come to the housing fair next Wednesday. It'll be great and fun.
Jesse, any last minute thoughts?
Nope.
All right, awesome. So we thank everybody. Thank you for the thumbs up and the big hands that we're getting. Again, if you have a question, please send it to through the Q&A. Also, if you need to contact us, the phone number for the off-campus student lounge, which is also the off-campus student engagement and family engagement office, is 205-975-0684. And of course, you can go on the website uab.edu/families or /off-campus housing for more information. So we thank everybody for attending. We do have a raised hand, but we would love to have that question in the Q&A. If you need to reach off-campus later, the email is offcampus@uab.edu. And without further ado, we leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. Have a wonderful rest of your sunny, beautiful, warm day that's outside. And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at the fair and next Thursday for our other webinar. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye.